The sky burned in shades of orange and crimson above a shattered world. Dust rolled through the air as explosions echoed across the valley. Among the wreckage of fallen ships, a lone human soldier named Ryan moved quickly between the ruins, his rifle ready. His armor was scratched and blackened, a sign that he had been fighting for far too long. The planet Tarine Ford had once been rich with life, but now it was a graveyard of machines and fire. The human fleet and the Valari Empire had clashed here only days ago. What was left of both sides scattered across the planet, fighting not for victory but for survival. Ryan had been part of a small strike unit that was ambushed while evacuating civilians. His unit was gone now, only he remained. As he scanned the terrain for movement, a sharp sound broke through the wind. Metal scraping against rock. He aimed his weapon instantly. From behind a fallen cruiser emerged a tall figure in silver armor. The markings on the chest plate were unmistakable. Valari military insignia. Ryan tightened his grip, ready for another fight. But the alien soldier raised her hand slowly, showing no weapon. Her voice came through a translator unit fixed to her neck. "Human," she said firmly. "I am Captain Arya of the Valari Empire. I am not your enemy today." Ryan kept his aim steady. "Last time I heard that, your fleet bombed one of our colonies." Arya's visor glowed faintly as her helmet scanned him. "Your fleet did the same to us. Now both our armies are destroyed. If we fight here, we both die." He studied her for a long moment. The ground trembled from a distant blast. He knew she was right. The rogue faction known as the Drex Marauders had turned the battle into chaos. They targeted both sides, destroying command ships and cutting communication lines. Finally, Ryan lowered his rifle but did not holster it. "Fine. We help each other until we get off this rock. After that, you go your way, I go mine." Arya nodded once. "Agreed." They moved together through the burning ruins. Arya's armor reflected the fires around them, and her movements were precise, almost graceful. Ryan noticed that despite the heavy gear, she walked with the calm focus of a commander who had seen countless battles. They reached the remains of an old command outpost and set up a temporary shelter. Ryan used scavenged metal to block the wind, while Arya activated a small power cell from her armor to power a field lamp. The warm light flickered across their faces, showing exhaustion more than anger. Ryan sat against a wall, checking his weapon. Arya removed her helmet, revealing smooth, pale green skin with faint blue patterns across her temples. Her eyes, bright and sharp, studied him with quiet curiosity. "You are wounded," she said, noticing the burn along his arm. "I've had worse," Ryan replied, wrapping a cloth around it. "You?" She glanced at the crack along her shoulder plate. "Armor took most of it." Silence fell for a while. Outside, thunder rolled like distant cannon fire. Arya finally spoke again. "Why did you save me earlier?" "You could have left," Ryan shrugged. "Didn't think about it. You were under fire, I was closer. Instinct, I guess." She tilted her head slightly. "Instinct. Humans act fast without logic. It is both admirable and dangerous." He smiled faintly. "You sound like my commander." "I am a commander," she replied evenly. "Or I was." Ryan looked at her more carefully. "What happened to your unit?" She paused before answering. "Gone. Ambushed during extraction. I was left behind," he nodded slowly. "Same for me." For the first time, their shared loss filled the silence instead of tension. Two soldiers from enemy sides, both left behind by war. Later, when the wind grew colder, Ryan started a small fire using old fuel cells. The orange light reflected off the cracked wall and shimmered against Arya's armor. She watched him quietly, studying the human who fought with no empire left to guide him. "You humans," she said after a long pause. "You fight even when the battle is lost." "Why?" Ryan looked into the fire. "Because someone has to keep trying. If we stop, everything we lost means nothing." Arya seemed to think about that. In her culture, wars were decided by logic, numbers, and command orders. But this human fought for reasons that could not be measured. As the night deepened, a signal flickered on her visor. She checked it and frowned. "The Drex are moving east. Their scanners will sweep this area by dawn." "Then we move before that," Ryan said, tightening his pack. "Across the ridge," she replied. "Old mining tunnels there. We can hide." "Lead the way," he said. They moved through the broken city at night, the moonlight casting long shadows over metal ruins. At one point, Arya stopped and motioned for silence. From a collapsed building nearby came the mechanical growl of a Drex patrol drone. Ryan crouched low, holding his breath. Arya lifted her wrist device and sent out a weak pulse that disrupted the drone's sensors for a few seconds. She looked back at Ryan and whispered, "Go." They slipped through the shadows until the sound faded behind them. When they finally reached the ridge, Ryan's legs ached and his breath came heavy, but Arya moved as if the weight of her armor meant nothing. She stopped at the entrance of a dark tunnel and scanned the inside. "Clear," she said. Inside the tunnel, they found broken mining carts and long-dead lights. Ryan dropped his gear and leaned against the wall. "You sure this place is safe?" "For now," she replied. They rested. The faint sound of dripping water echoed through the cavern. Ryan caught her watching him again, her expression unreadable. "What is it?" he asked. Arya hesitated, then said softly, "Back there. When the drones came, you looked calm." "No fear," he smiled faintly. "Fear never helps. I just do what needs to be done." She studied him longer, as if trying to understand something hidden. "You humans are strange. You fight with reason yet live with emotion. Guess that's what makes us human." She looked away, her eyes reflecting the faint glow from her armor. "Maybe that is what makes you strong." Hours later, as Ryan began to drift into sleep, she spoke again. "Human." He opened one eye. "Ryan, my name's Ryan." "Ryan," she repeated carefully, testing the sound. "When I asked earlier why you saved me, you said instinct. But now I ask again, why risk your life for someone who once called you an enemy?" Ryan thought for a moment, then gave a small smile. "Because out here, it's not about enemies. It's about survival. You were in trouble and I could help, that's all." She looked at him silently, her expression softening slightly. For a Valari warrior, such logic did not exist. Compassion in battle was weakness, but she could not see weakness in him. As the fire flickered low, Arya whispered one last question. "What are you thinking now, human?" Ryan smiled again, eyes half closed. "You." She blinked in surprise, unsure how to answer. The word hung between them, quiet but powerful. For a moment she forgot the war, the ranks and the orders waiting beyond the stars. When she turned away, her pulse quickened. She had fought many battles, but none had ever made her heart race like this. The night inside the mining tunnel passed slowly. Ryan woke first, feeling the dull ache in his arm where the burn still hurt. The air smelled of metal and dust. Across from him, Arya sat with her back to the wall, still awake. Her silver armor dimly reflected the firelight. "You did not sleep," Ryan said, rubbing his neck. "I do not need much rest," she answered quietly. "Valari bodies recover faster than humans." He smiled a little. "Lucky you. Humans break easily." Arya gave a faint sound that almost felt like a laugh, though she quickly hid it. "Yet humans never stop fighting." "I do not understand that." Ryan stretched his shoulders. "Maybe we just hate giving up. It keeps us alive." They packed what little gear they had and moved deeper into the tunnels. The path twisted down into darkness, where the sound of falling water echoed like a heartbeat. Arya led with her armor's light beam. Ryan followed close behind, rifle in hand. As they moved, he noticed the strange carvings on the tunnel walls, ancient symbols of the first miners who once lived here. "People used to work in these tunnels," he said. Arya nodded. "Long before your people came to this sector, my ancestors traded minerals from here. It is strange walking through their ghosts." Ryan touched one of the symbols. "Guess we all leave something behind." Hours later, they found a large chamber that opened to the surface through a narrow gap. Sunlight cut through the dust, bright and warm. Ryan climbed up to check the view while Arya scanned her visor. "The Drex patrols are spreading," she said. "We must cross the valley before nightfall." "Then we move now," Ryan replied. They began their journey across the rough land once more. Around them lay broken ships and burnt soil. Smoke rose from far-off wreckage. Every step reminded them how fragile the peace between humans and Valari had been. At midday, they stopped near a ridge to rest. Ryan sat down, taking a sip from his water pack. Arya removed her helmet, letting the wind brush against her face. Her eyes were calm, but her mind was full of questions. She looked at him and said, "When you said you were thinking about me, what did you mean?" Ryan glanced at her, unsure how to answer. "I meant you saved me out there. You didn't have to. Most soldiers wouldn't risk that for someone from another army." Arya tilted her head. "You did the same. You could have left me. Yet you stayed." "Maybe we're both strange," he said with a small smile. She looked away, though he noticed the faint color rising on her pale skin. Strange indeed, she murmured. The wind picked up dust around them, carrying the scent of burnt metal. Ryan stood, scanning the horizon. We need to reach the mountain ridge before dark. We'll have a better signal there. They began climbing the rocky slope, their boots scraping against stone. Halfway up, they heard the sharp whine of engines. Arya's visor flashed red. Drex flyers incoming. Ryan ducked behind a rock as 3 drones swept overhead, firing plasma bursts into the ridge. The blast shook the ground. Arya raised her arm and fired a pulse shot from her wrist blaster, striking one drone and sending it spiraling into the rocks. Ryan took aim at the second and fired 2 controlled bursts. The drone exploded in midair, but the third one spotted them and released a swarm of small seeker mines. Down! Arya shouted. Ryan dropped behind cover just as the air filled with blue sparks. One mine struck near Arya, sending her tumbling down the slope. Her armor clanged against the rock as she hit the ground. Arya! Ryan ran to her, ignoring the heat from the explosions. He found her lying still, her leg armor dented. She was breathing hard but conscious. I am fine, she said quickly, trying to stand. The joint on her armor sparked, locking in place. No, it is damaged. Ryan looked at the metal joint, then pulled a tool from his pack. Hold still. You cannot repair Valerie armor, she said. Watch me, he replied, prying the bent plate loose. With careful effort, he adjusted the servo inside and forced the joint to reset. When she stood again, her movement was stiff but functional. She stared at him with surprise. How do you know this? Worked as an engineer before the war, he said. Machines are machines. Doesn't matter who built them. Arya looked at him for a long moment. Her expression softened. You risked your life again. Ryan wiped his hands. I told you before. That's just what I do. When they finally reached the ridge, the sun was setting. The sky turned deep red and shadows stretched across the land. Arya activated a small beacon device. A weak signal flickered on the display. It will take time, she said. The communication relays are unstable. Ryan sat beside her, looking at the horizon. We might have to stay here for the night. She nodded and removed her helmet again. The soft glow of the sunset reflected in her eyes. For the first time, Ryan noticed how tired she looked. Not just physically, but deep within. You miss your people, he said quietly. She hesitated before answering. Yes, but I do not know if I still belong with them. Valari soldiers do not show weakness. They do not question command. I have done both. Ryan turned to her. That's not weakness. That's being human. Arya's gaze lingered on him. Human. A word that means something different to every species. To you, it means hope. To us, it means chaos. Ryan chuckled softly. Maybe a little of both. Night fell quickly. The stars appeared one by one, bright against the dark sky. Ryan set up a small light while Arya checked her armor systems. When she removed a piece of damaged plating, he saw faint scars beneath. Old battle marks that told stories of countless fights. You've been through a lot, he said. Every Valari warrior has, she replied. We are raised to serve the Empire without question. But now, after this war, I wonder what that service truly meant. Ryan listened quietly. He could hear the struggle in her voice. Maybe it's time you start deciding for yourself. She looked at him sharply, then softened again. And what about you, human? What do you fight for? Ryan looked up at the stars. For the people who can't. For those who didn't make it. For something better. Arya followed his gaze. Something better, she repeated softly as if testing the meaning. Silence settled between them, calm and heavy. The faint sound of wind whispered through the ridge. Ryan leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Arya watched him quietly. The way he spoke, the way he moved, it was unlike anyone she had ever known. There was no arrogance, no cruelty, only quiet strength. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. Ryan, he opened his eyes. Yeah? What are you thinking now? She asked, her tone careful but curious. He smiled. Still you. Her breath caught slightly. She looked away, pretending to check her armor. But her heart beat faster. She had faced monsters and machines, yet a simple human word unsettled her more than any threat. Later that night, as the stars burned bright above, Arya found herself unable to sleep. Ryan had drifted off beside the fire, his weapon still near his hand. She sat beside him, studying the lines of his face. There was peace there, even after everything they had endured. For the first time in her life, she envied that peace. The signal beacon blinked faintly beside her. She knew that soon they would be found, either by her people or by the Drex. But in that brief quiet, she realized something deeper. The human beside her had changed the way she saw the universe. When dawn came, she rose and looked out at the horizon. Ryan stood beside her, ready to move again. The light of morning shone over the battlefield below. "This world is broken," she said softly. Ryan nodded. "Then maybe it's time we fix something, even if it's just a small part of it." Arya looked at him, the faintest hint of a smile touching her lips. Perhaps. As they began walking again, the bond between them grew stronger, not through words, but through every step they took together across the silent ruins of war. The morning air was cool as Ryan and Arya made their way down the ridge. The sun rose slowly over the broken land, lighting the wrecks of old ships across the valley. Smoke still drifted from the ruins, but the fighting had stopped. Somewhere far away, both sides were retreating, leaving only silence behind. Ryan adjusted his pack and checked his rifle. The burn on his arm had worsened, but he ignored the pain. Arya walked beside him, scanning the ground with her visor. Her armor was cracked in several places, showing the dark blue undersuit beneath. "We are running low on power cells," she said. "If my systems fail, I will lose communication and life support." Ryan looked at her gear. "We can try to find another Valari drop pod. Maybe there's one nearby." "There is one," she replied, pointing toward the west. "It crashed 2 days ago. I received its last signal before the storm." "Then that's our best chance," Ryan said. They moved through the ruins carefully, staying close to cover. Every few minutes, Arya stopped to listen for the humming sound of Drex drones. The rogue faction hunted survivors to take their equipment and supplies. At midday, they reached the wreck of the Valari pod. The metal was half buried in dirt, smoke rising faintly from the cracks. Ryan went first, checking for traps. Inside, the pod smelled of burnt circuits and fuel. He found a small storage case with power cells and emergency rations. "Got something," he said, handing the power cells to Arya. She replaced the damaged one on her armor. The faint blue lights across her suit glowed stronger again. "Good work, human." "Ryan," he corrected, smiling a little. "Ryan," she repeated. Her voice softened slightly when she said it. They shared the rations in silence. The food was tasteless, but it was better than nothing. Outside, the wind began to rise again. While Ryan checked the horizon, Arya studied him quietly. His movements were quick and sure, yet calm. He never wasted effort. She had fought beside hundreds of soldiers, but none like him. "You are not afraid," she said suddenly. Ryan looked at her. "Afraid of what?" "Death. You walk through battle as if it does not matter." He thought for a moment. "Maybe because I've seen it too much. When you lose enough, fear becomes a waste of time." Arya looked down. "In my world, fear is hidden. We are trained to feel nothing. But I do feel something, even if I should not." "What do you feel?" Ryan asked softly. She hesitated, then said, "Conflict. I was raised to hate your kind. Yet you fight beside me, risk your life, and never ask for anything. I do not understand it." Ryan gave a small laugh. "I don't think it's about understanding. Sometimes it's just doing what's right." She stared at him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. The faint warmth in his expression made something inside her armor tighten. She looked away quickly. Before she could say more, her visor flashed red. "Movement. Drex patrol. 5 units closing from the north." Ryan immediately crouched behind a rock and raised his rifle. "We hold them here." Arya powered up her wrist blaster and took position beside him. The Drex soldiers appeared over the hill, their armor dark and jagged like shards of glass. Their mechanical voices echoed through the dust. Ryan fired first, hitting one in the chest. Arya followed with a plasma shot that tore through another. The fight erupted in flashes of light and thunder. A grenade landed near them. Ryan pushed Arya behind a rock just as it exploded. Shrapnel tore through his armor. He grunted in pain but stayed focused. Arya fired again, striking 2 more enemies. The last Drex charged forward with a blade arm raised. Ryan swung his rifle and struck the creature's head, knocking it down before finishing it with a single shot. Silence returned. The wind blew through the smoke. Ryan leaned against the rock, his arm bleeding from a deep cut. Arya ran to him. "You are hurt again." "I'll live," he said, pressing a cloth to the wound. She grabbed his hand and forced it away. "Hold still." From her armor's storage, she took a small healing patch and pressed it against his skin. The patch hissed softly, closing the wound within seconds. Ryan looked at her. You didn't have to use your medical supply. I did, she replied firmly. You saved my life twice. This is not a debt, it is respect, he smiled faintly. Respect accepted. For the first time, Arya smiled back, a small but real one. Good. They began clearing the area, collecting what little the Drex had left. As they worked, Arya suddenly stopped. Her scanner picked up something deeper underground, a hidden energy source. Under this ground is a bunker, she said. Old Valeri tech. We can use it for shelter. They found the entrance half buried in rubble. With combined strength, they forced the hatch open and descended into darkness. Inside, the bunker lights flickered on. The walls were lined with consoles and ancient supplies. This was a command outpost, Arya said quietly, touching one of the panels. My people used it during the First Wars. Ryan whistled softly. Looks like it hasn't been touched in decades. They searched the rooms. Ryan found water containers still sealed, and Arya located a working console. It showed an outdated star map with routes between Valeri and human space. As they studied it, Ryan noticed her hands trembling slightly. You okay? She nodded slowly. This place reminds me of my first mission. I was trained here. I believed every word they told me about humans being dangerous and selfish. And now? He asked. Now I see something else. You are not what they said. Ryan placed a hand on the console. People lie in wars. Makes it easier to fight. Arya looked at him with quiet eyes. And you still fight. But for truth, not lies. Ryan shrugged. Someone has to. Hours passed as they repaired equipment and gathered supplies. The bunker became quiet again. Outside, the storm had grown stronger, so they stayed inside for the night. Ryan sat near a small heater while Arya checked the armor on her leg. The dent from the earlier fight still made it hard for her to move. He knelt beside her. Let me help, she hesitated. You do not know Valeri armor systems, he smiled. I learn fast. He carefully removed the damaged plate and adjusted the inner joint. When he finished, she moved her leg with ease again. Better? He asked. Arya tested the motion. Yes, you are skilled, Ryan grinned. Told you. Machines are the same everywhere. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. You fix more than machines, Ryan. He met her gaze, unsure what she meant. Her voice was softer now, almost uncertain. She turned away before he could reply. They sat together in silence, listening to the storm outside. The light from the heater cast gentle shadows on the wall. After a while, Arya spoke again. In my culture, removing armor before another person is a sign of trust. Only commanders or family may see us without it. Ryan nodded slowly. Makes sense. Armor hides everything, but it also keeps you distant. She looked down at the symbol on her chest plate. It is what defines us. Without it, we are just beings trying to survive. Ryan smiled lightly. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Her eyes met his. Perhaps. The moment felt calm, but then a sharp alarm from the console broke it. Arya rushed over. The beacon signal had been detected. Valeri forces were heading toward their location, but so were Drex scouts. They both found us, Ryan said. We'll have company soon. Arya's voice was firm again. Then we fight one last time. They prepared for the coming battle. Ryan checked his rifle, loading the last of his ammo. Arya powered up her armor, blue lights pulsing across it. As the bunker trembled under the first distant explosions, Ryan looked at her. No matter what happens, we hold together. Arya nodded, gripping her weapon. Together. The walls shook again. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ryan moved closer to her side. If we make it through, he said, maybe you can finally take that armor off. Arya glanced at him, her expression soft but steady. Perhaps you have earned that right. The sound of engines grew louder outside. The battle was coming to them. Arya and Ryan stood side by side, ready to face whatever came through the door. In that moment, the human and the alien were no longer enemies, no longer symbols of two broken armies. They were soldiers fighting for survival, and something greater that neither fully understood yet. The bunker shook as heavy blasts hit the ground above. Dust rained down from the ceiling and the lights flickered. Ryan grabbed his rifle while Arya activated her helmet and checked her armor's status. The storm outside had turned into a war again. Both Valeri reinforcements and Drex raiders were closing in fast. 2 signals, Arya said, reading her visor display. The Valeri fleet is approaching from orbit, but the Drex are closer. We must hold this place until my people arrive. Ryan looked at the entrance hatch. Then we stand here. They moved quickly, turning the bunker into a defense point. Ryan placed debris near the door for cover, while Arya adjusted the field generator to power the outer shields. The hum of the old system filled the chamber. Arya glanced at him. If the Drex break through, do not wait for me. Take the back exit and head east. Ryan shook his head. Not happening. We fight together. Her tone grew sharp. You are human. This is not your battle, he met her eyes. It became my battle the moment I saved you. For a second, she wanted to argue, but the sound of approaching engines cut her words short. The ground trembled as Drex soldiers surrounded the bunker. Ryan crouched behind cover. Arya took position by the control console, her blaster ready. The first blast hit the door, shaking it but not breaking through. Sparks flew across the metal. Ryan aimed toward the narrow viewing slit and fired when he saw a dark shape outside. The shot hit and the creature fell. Arya activated the outer defense grid. Blue energy flashed across the entrance, shocking several Drex that tried to charge, but more came behind them. Too many, Ryan said. Then we make them pay for every step, Arya replied. The Drex used explosive rounds to break through the first barrier. The blast filled the bunker with smoke. Ryan fired again, taking down 2 more. Arya moved beside him, firing precise shots from her wrist cannon. The air grew hot and heavy with energy bursts. Ryan reloaded and checked her position. You're running low on power again. I know, she said, voice steady. The cells will not last long. The door cracked under another hit. A Drex warrior burst through, swinging a heavy blade. Ryan blocked it with his rifle and pushed back hard. Arya fired at the creature's chest, sending it crashing to the floor. Ryan turned, breathing hard. Nice shot, she gave a quick nod, reloading her blaster. Stay focused. The noise outside grew louder as more Drex units gathered. Arya checked the console again. The Valari ships were entering the atmosphere, but they were still far away. 10 minutes, she said. We must survive until then. Ryan took cover behind a metal crate. Then let's give them 10 minutes they'll never forget. The next wave came faster. Plasma fire poured through the opening. Ryan moved from cover to cover, firing short bursts. Arya joined him, her armor glowing faintly each time she fired. The floor shook under the impact of grenades. One blast threw Ryan against the wall. His vision blurred. When he tried to stand, pain shot through his side. Arya rushed over and pulled him behind cover. You are injured again. Just a scratch, he said, forcing a breath. She pressed her hand over his wound and activated another healing patch. You are careless, she said, voice tight. Or brave, he said with a faint grin. Her eyes met his. Bravery without reason is just death. Then you're my reason, he said quietly. For a brief second she froze. The battle outside seemed to fade. Then she shook her head and returned her focus to the fight. Stay down, she ordered. Ryan reloaded and looked toward the doorway again. The Drex were regrouping. They were preparing one final push. He knew they wouldn't hold much longer. Arya stood in front of him, her armor cracked and glowing from the heat. She raised her weapon, ready for whatever came next. Ryan, she said softly, if I fall, do not let them take me. He looked at her, refusing to accept that. You're not falling today. The Drex attacked again, pouring into the entrance. Arya moved like lightning, firing shot after shot. Ryan joined in, hitting anything that moved. The noise was deafening. Energy bolts lit up the bunker like fire. Suddenly, a large Drex warrior broke through the smoke and charged straight at Arya. She fired, but her weapon overheated. The creature swung its massive arm, knocking her back. Ryan ran forward, tackling the monster with all his strength. They crashed against the wall. Ryan grabbed a fallen blade and drove it into the creature's armor. Sparks flew and the Drex fell. When Ryan turned, he saw Arya struggling to stand. The chest plate of her armor was cracked open. He rushed to her side. You're hit. I can still fight, she said, but her voice weakened. Ryan helped her stand and placed her against the wall. Stay with me. The sound of engines roared above. Arya looked up. Valari ships. They are here. A moment later, the ground shook again as plasma strikes from orbit hit the Drex positions outside. The enemy began to retreat under the bombardment. Arya tried to move, but her armor was too damaged. Ryan lifted her arm over his shoulder. Together, they walked out of the bunker as the sky turned bright with fire. Valari dropships landed nearby, soldiers in silver armor rushing to secure the area. One of them shouted when he saw Arya. "Captain Arya is alive!" Arya's second-in-command ran forward, saluting her. "Captain, we thought you were gone." Arya nodded weakly. "Not yet." He looked at Ryan with confusion. "A human? Why is he here?" Arya steadied herself and spoke clearly. "He is the reason I am still alive. You will show him respect." The soldiers looked uncertain but obeyed her command. Ryan helped her sit on a supply crate while medics moved in. "You can rest now," Ryan said. Arya looked at him, her eyes softer than before. "And you?" "I'll be fine," he said with a tired smile. As the medics worked, one of the Valari officers approached Arya. "Captain, command wants you on the ship immediately. They need your report." Arya stood slowly, pain visible in her movements. "Understood." She turned back to Ryan. "Come with me." The officer frowned. "Captain, humans are not permitted on Valari vessels." Arya's tone hardened. "He comes with me." The officer hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Captain." Ryan followed her to the dropship. The door closed behind them, sealing out the smoke and noise. Inside, the air was clean and cold. Arya removed her damaged helmet, her face calm despite exhaustion. She sat across from him. "You have changed what I believed about humans," she said. Ryan smiled. "And you changed what I believed about Valari." As the ship lifted off, the battlefield below grew smaller. The war that had destroyed everything seemed distant now. When they reached orbit, Arya looked through the window at the stars. "I will face questions for saving you. My leaders will not understand." Ryan looked at her reflection in the glass. "Then tell them the truth." "What truth?" she asked. "That you found something worth saving," he said. For a long time she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Perhaps I did." The ship docked with the Valari command cruiser. Inside, guards and officers lined the corridor. Arya walked ahead with pride, though her armor was broken and blackened. Ryan followed behind, feeling every eye on him. In the medical bay, the doctors insisted she remove her armor for treatment. She hesitated, then turned to Ryan. "Wait outside." He nodded, but she stopped him with a quiet voice. "No, stay." The room fell silent. Slowly, she released the locks on her chest plate and lifted the armor away. Beneath it, her form was not the cold image of a warrior, but the shape of someone tired, wounded and alive. She looked at him with clear eyes. "Now you see me as I truly am." Ryan smiled softly. "I already did." For the first time, Arya smiled without fear or command. The war was still far from over, but in that small space of peace, something far greater had begun. The Valari command ship drifted high above the ruined planet, its silver hull glowing in the starlight. Inside, the halls were quiet, filled only with the low hum of engines. Ryan followed Arya through long corridors lined with officers who stopped and stared. None had ever seen a human walk beside one of their captains. Arya's armor had been removed and sent for repair. She now wore a simple uniform, the deep blue fabric marked by her rank insignia. Her step was slower than before, but her eyes held strength. Ryan could see that every Valari they passed looked at her with a mixture of respect and confusion. They entered the command chamber, where the High Council of the Valari fleet waited. 4 figures sat around a glowing table, their armor polished and their faces cold. The leader, High Commander Saral, turned toward Arya. "Captain Arya," he said sharply, "you were reported missing in action. Yet here you stand with a human soldier. Explain yourself." Arya bowed her head slightly. "I survived because of this man. His name is Ryan. Without him, the Drex would have ended my mission. He fought beside me with honor." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Saral's eyes narrowed. "A human saved a Valari commander? Why would he do such a thing?" Ryan stepped forward before Arya could answer. "Because she needed help. It was the right thing to do." Saral looked at him with disbelief. "You defy logic, human. Our 2 races have been enemies for decades." Ryan met his gaze. "Maybe that's why it's time to stop." The room fell silent. Arya turned slightly toward him, surprised by his courage. Saral frowned, but curiosity flickered in his expression. "You speak boldly for someone in enemy territory." Ryan nodded. "War destroyed both our sides. We've both lost friends, families, and homes. Out there on that planet, it didn't matter who came from where. We were just soldiers trying to survive. Maybe that's what your empire needs to remember." Arya looked at him with pride. She could feel the truth in his words, and so could some of the council. One of the younger officers leaned forward. Perhaps the human is right. The Drex have become a greater threat to us all. A new alliance could save thousands of lives. But Siral's tone was hard. Peace with humans will not erase what has been done. Arya stepped forward. No, but it will stop what is coming. The Drex are not just scavengers anymore. They have grown stronger. They attack both sides without reason. If we do not stand together, none of us will survive. The room grew tense. The council members whispered among themselves. Cyril finally stood. I will take your words to the Emperor. But know this, Captain. You have risked your career and your honor for this human. Arya lifted her chin. Then let history judge me for it. Cyril turned away, ending the meeting. Arya and Ryan were escorted out by 2 guards. As they walked back through the corridor, Ryan looked at her. You didn't have to defend me. Yes, I did, she said firmly. You earned that right. Later, in her private quarters, Arya sat near the large window overlooking the stars. The lights of nearby ships shimmered like distant cities. Ryan stood beside her, watching the endless void. I never thought I'd see this, he said quietly. A human standing on a Valari ship without a weapon pointed at him. Arya smiled faintly. Change begins with something small, sometimes with a word, sometimes with a single act of kindness. He looked at her reflection in the glass. You sound like a philosopher now. Perhaps I am learning from you, she replied. They sat in silence for a while. Then Arya turned to him. The council will need days to decide what to do. Until then, you are my guest. Guest or prisoner? Ryan asked with a teasing smile. Her lips curved slightly. Guest unless you cause trouble. I'll try not to, he said, laughing softly. For the first time since the war began, she laughed too. It was quiet, but it sounded like peace. That night, the ship floated in orbit, waiting for orders. In the observation deck, Ryan found himself staring at the stars again. Arya joined him, wearing a light mantle instead of her armor. You seem deep in thought, she said. Just thinking about what comes next, he replied. If your people and mine ever find peace, what happens to soldiers like us? She looked at him gently. Then we learn to live. Ryan nodded slowly. Maybe that's harder than fighting. Arya stepped closer. Perhaps, but it is worth trying. They stood there for a long moment. The stars reflected in her pale green eyes. Then she asked softly, What are you thinking now? Ryan smiled, his voice calm and warm. You. Her breath caught, and she looked down briefly before meeting his gaze again. You never change your answer. Because it's still true, he said. She studied him silently. Then she reached to her wrist and deactivated the last piece of her armor interface. The small device clicked off, leaving her completely unarmored for the first time since he had met her. You said once that armor keeps us distant, she whispered. Maybe it is time I let that distance go. Ryan looked at her, not as a soldier or an alien, but as someone who had fought beside him through fire and pain. I think it already did, he said. Arya took a step closer. The hum of the ship was the only sound. She looked peaceful now, her expression softer than ever before. Ryan, she said quietly. In our culture, removing armor before another person is a promise. It means trust and acceptance, he nodded. Then I'm honored. The moment was calm and real, filled with unspoken respect. 2 beings from different worlds, standing together with no walls between them. A soft chime interrupted them. Arya pressed the console beside her. The communication officer's voice came through. Captain Arya, the High Council has sent orders. You are to prepare for transmission to Earth Command. They want to discuss terms of peace. Arya looked at Ryan. It seems they listened. He exhaled with relief. Then maybe all this fighting finally meant something. She smiled. It did. You gave them reason to hope. Later, as the Valari fleet repositioned itself near the damaged human ships, a massive broadcast began between the 2 sides. Arya stood on the deck beside Ryan, speaking to both human and Valari leaders through the holographic display. Today, she said clearly, we end the war between our peoples. The Drex threat has forced us to see the truth. We are stronger together than apart. This human beside me risked everything to save not just one Valari, but what remains of hope in this galaxy. Let this be the start of something new. The transmission ended with silence. Then, across the screens came a reply from Earth Command. The human admiral said, agreed. The war is over. Cheers erupted across the decks of both fleets. Soldiers from two species who once hated each other now stood side by side, unsure whether to cheer or cry. Arya turned to Ryan. "It is done," he smiled. "So, Captain, what now?" She looked out at the stars. "Now we rebuild. Together." As the two fleets moved side by side through the void, the first light of a new dawn spread across the stars. Ryan and Arya stood at the viewing deck, their reflections glowing faintly against the window. Arya turned to him once more. "You asked what happens to soldiers when peace begins," she said. Ryan nodded. Yes, her eyes met his. "They learn to live, Ryan, and to remember who showed them how." He smiled. "Then I guess I have a good teacher." Arya's expression softened. "And I have a reason to keep learning." Outside, the human and Valeri fleets formed a single formation for the first time in history. The war-torn world below began to heal, and among the endless stars, two soldiers who once stood as enemies found something far greater than victory. Under that quiet light, she asked him one last time, "What are you thinking?" He smiled the same way he had on that first night. "You," he said. This time she did not look away. Her smile was gentle, full of peace and understanding. For the first time, the warrior and the human were truly unarmored, standing as equals beneath the stars. The galaxy was silent around them, but it no longer felt cold.